Welcome to video number 2 in Module 301, Job Search Strategies. At the end of the first video, I asked you to think about what you believe employers will value as you go applying for jobs and how you measure up in terms of your personal inventory. If you're like many of my previous students, you might have overestimated the skills and knowledge part of things. It's certainly true that employers want to know that you have the education and the background and experience to do the job once you're there. But it turns out they value attitude far more than they value that skills and knowledge aspect. That's good news if you're new to the field. If you can go in and show that you have a great attitude, that will often mean more to them than a person with long experience or a list of long educational credentials, but maybe not so good of an attitude. And that's because employers care far more about people skills than they do technical skills. If you think about it, if you've ever been in a store or a restaurant and needed help, my guess is that you were never impressed by the fact that the staff person could use the computer system effectively or was quick to navigate around the building. But I'll bet you were far more impressed by the fact the person seemed to be enthusiastic about helping you, or who stuck with you until you were actually helped. Employers care about your potential for learning and growth as well. Not only do they hope that one day you'll go on to be a leader in their organization, but they're hoping that you'll be very adaptable under circumstances where there could be stress, adversity, or change. Another thing that people often forget to put in their personal inventory are what I would call the basics. I'm guessing if you look at your list, you didn't include the fact that you show up on time, that you stay to the end of the day, that your teeth have been brushed, and that you know what constitutes appropriate attire, for example. But you'd be surprised how many people don't do those things. And that's a real problem because employers are very uncomfortable when they have to give you feedback on the stuff that I call the parent lessons, the things that they expect you would have learned at home. They're very happy to give you feedback about your technical proficiencies, like how to use the computer system or the best way to write a report. But they become very, very uncomfortable when they have to tell you that you shouldn't stay up all night long with your friends before you come in for your shift, or that you shouldn't use bad language in front of clients or family members. So don't forget to show that you have those basic proficiencies. And you do that by being well organized, dressing the part, demonstrating in your body language and your facial expressions that you really do understand the social cues of being an adult. In the year 2000, an organization called the Conference Board of Canada did a study. They asked employers all across Canada what were their main reasons for letting go of employees. And it turned out that only 3% of people that were let go because they weren't very good from a technical aspect at their job. So I'm going to get you to pause and blog for a moment and write down what you think the main reasons were for people losing their jobs. And a second question, how do you think the information that came out of that study in 2000 has shaped the way that Canadian organizations go about recruiting new staff and evaluating their current staff? Take a moment to jot that down and then restart the video. It turns out that employers value who you are far more than what you can do. And that's not always been the way. If you go back to the 1950s and 60s, people got hired often just because they had the right letters behind their name or had a certain number of years of experience. Seniority was a really valuable thing, for example, in collective agreements. But what started to emerge was that often those people who had the most skills were not necessarily the most effective. Organizations began to value what they call low-maintenance, high-yield people. If you work in human resources or as a manager, it's fairly common for people to talk about the 3%ers. And what they mean is there's an old expression. 3% of your people will take 97% of your time. Every human resource manager's desk has a set of files on it that have been on it many, many times before. The other 97% of those staff never cross the desk of that human resources manager. And the reasons why most people cross those desks can come down to one word: attitude. Almost always they're people who seem to be kind of not checked into their job, or who don't have good self-care skills, who can't maintain a schedule or get along with other people. Organizations want people who don't give them any of those signs and signals. So if you're applying for a job and you seem disorganized, you seem easily thrown off of your game or made upset, Don't be surprised if an organization doesn't seem interested in you. This is one of the reasons why we're going to be so precise about our resumes, our body language, our interview skills, and even our appearance. And the other thing they're looking for is people who have high yield potential. In other words, people who look like they're going to end up paying off in more than just being a day-to-day employee. They might be people who are setting a good role model, who are highly enthusiastic, or who demonstrate vision and leadership. So if you can perfect this combination of looking like you're easy to deal with and you do more than they expect, then they're much more likely to employ you. Organizations love people with potential for growth. Now, we've already talked about that, but what we need to think about is how do we grow? If you show an eagerness to be a student, whether it's by taking training opportunities or by talking about learning you've done from your own personal experiences or from reading that you do, if you seem really receptive to feedback, or even better, if you seem willing to go and seek feedback, and something we've done often in our class, if you seem inclined to self-examine and to come up with concrete and realistic self-improvement plans, all of those will be very impressive, both to recruiters and in annual reviews. That's something that you can expect people to do in those annual reviews. Employers also want you to want them. And what we mean by this is employers will not be turned on by the idea that you're choosing them simply because they have the best hours, the best pay, or because they are in your neighborhood. They know that the people who stick with them the longest and who do the best job are there because they have an alignment of values. So if you can do some research to find out what that organization's underlying values and principles are, and you can see whether there's a fit and speak to that in the course of your resume, your cover letter, and your interview, you're going to do far, far better. Back to those conference board people. The skills study we talked about going back to 2000 was called Employability Skills 2000. And they've continued to do that work since. I have put on our webpage a 2-page PDF reader that I expect you to look at so that you can complete this next and final blog entry for this video. You'll see that they identified 3 key areas where people were often losing their jobs. 3 areas that people needed to have, and they called these employability skills. And they fit into areas called fundamental skills, meaning the things that underlie all other things, personal management skills, so self-care, and teamwork skills, the ability to work well with others. When you do that 2-page reading, you'll be able to see in a much more detailed way what they mean in each of these areas. I'd like you to look at that and then answer this question in another blog entry on the website blog. How do you measure up against each of these specific areas? Do a personal evaluation. And how will you show your strengths to employers? In other words, how will you let them know through the process of applying that you're a person who possesses skills in these 3 areas? When you're done, move on to video number 3.